because these were people that left Europe for their freedom. Yeah.
How did all those people, how were they able to read without the government schooling?
Yeah, right. I don't know. Jeez, you think maybe they were homeschooled? Actually, in 1700s, that's a good point. In the 1700s, there was actually a resolution, either a resolution or a law in the state of Massachusetts that said every family, every group of 10 families was responsible for the elementary education within those 10 families, and every 5 groups of 10 families, in other words, every group of 50 families was responsible for the secondary education within those 50 families. It was bottom up, folks. That's what it was. It was from the bottom up. And the colonies, so the colonies were pretty ripe for this knowledge. And Thomas Paine just laid it out very clear, and it created a shift, and the people put the pressure on those delegates from the different colonies. And then on July 2nd, when they took the vote, it was unanimous. And of course, New York abstained. As far as I'm concerned, they could give the whole state back to England right now. But anyway, they abstained, and it was a unanimous decision. On July 4th, they signed the Declaration of Independence. But the whole message was about indigenous power versus surrogate power in common sense. Well, if you read the Declaration of Independence, which I know you guys are very familiar with, and you find out that the first 2 paragraphs of the Declaration of Independence, all they do is explain the concept of indigenous and surrogate power. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to separation. But that first paragraph declares who has the indigenous power and where it comes from. That's the first paragraph. Most powerful, second most powerful paragraph ever written in a political document. The second paragraph is even more powerful. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these, not just these, that among all these rights are 3, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. In other words, we the people, if we want a government for some reason, or we want a corporation or a partnership, we will create it, and we will institute that among ourselves, deriving their just powers from the consent of the government. In other words, the government derives their power from the consent of us. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and to institute new government. Could anything be more clear?
No.
Our whole country was based on these 2 paragraphs. That's it. Anything they say about, whether or not, thank you, whether or not secession is constitutional, whether or not we can really do this, whether or not a right to defend ourselves and own guns is a national right or a state right, it's all BS. It says it right there. We have all the power to defend. Those are all natural rights. There are rights. It's indigenous power. It is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Now, those 2 paragraphs are the core of the Declaration of Independence, and it's based upon those 2 paragraphs that the Constitution was created. Ed and I spent 11 days in St. Charles talking about all this stuff with about 140 people. 2 to 3 delegates from 48 states were voted and came to St. Charles together to talk about this. Now, one of the things I did before I came there is I read a book called The Illusion of Freedom by Martin Babbitt. I highly recommend you read that book and get everybody you know to read that book. Because what he does is he lays out how this stuff, all this basic principle I'm telling you about right here, who has the power, indigenous versus surrogate power, became corrupted right at the actual Constitutional Convention, right there. It was already being corrupted. However, there was enough people there that were for indigenous power that the way that the Constitution is written, it favors us for restoring our indigenous power. But what happened was, when the Washington administration, with Alexander Hamilton, who was the biggest traitor that ever lived in this country, they had Federalists in control. Basically, Hamilton ran the Washington administration. He was a Federalist. John Marshall, who was head of the Supreme Court, was a Federalist. John Jay, who was also a big Supreme Court justice, was a Federalist. Jefferson was basically, I don't know, one of the few in that administration who was not, who understood indigenous power clearly. And he finally couldn't handle it anymore and he left, biding his time, knowing he'd be able to come back in power at some time. But it got corrupted. The whole concept got corrupted right from the beginning. This book explains it. However, the Constitution itself, if interpreted properly, can really go a long way to helping us restore our indigenous power. I really believe that. But we have to get enough people that understand this. And then, because we have that indigenous power, if we can get enough people that understand that we have that power, keep us from being divided by right and left and Democrat and Republican and black and white or whatever they do use to divide us, and we can get together and come together, then we can absolutely take our country back. We can absolutely
What's the
restore
name of
it.
that book, Illusion of
Illusion of Freedom by Martin Babbitt. And it's not in print anymore, so you have to buy it go to Amazon and you can get used copies.
Joe, can you put that on the internet for us?
Yes? Okay. So,
The title of that book.
The Illusion of Freedom? Yeah, you can do that.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, so what did the founders do? How did they structure this? Anybody familiar with the way Moses had things structured under the Israelis? Okay, or the Anglo-Saxons? Remember the thing I said about the 10 families and 50 families? That's exactly how they had it structured. Both those civilizations had everything structured from the bottom up, where the 10 families would they would elect like a judge or leader. It was more like a judge though. And any problem that occurred within those 10 families, whether it was drug abuse or whatever, crime or anything, was handled by that person. The only reason that they would ever go above that, if it was something that they couldn't handle, or it was from a member of their 10 families with another group of 10 families. And for that, every 50 families hired or elected a judge. And then every, I think it was group, 100 families hired one. And then every group of 1,000 hired one. And there was, I don't know, maybe 40 or 50, I don't know, maybe 500 groups of 1,000 or something like that in the whole society. Moses was sort of at the top, but he didn't have anything to do because it was all bottom up. All the problems that had anything to do with what was going on within the community were all handled on the local level.